If there additional, and we may have some other legislators that are not committee members. Of course, I do appreciate the legislators that are committee members, but I just wanted to recognize those others for joining us today. I will, once we get started, we'll have a report from DFNA, and then I'd like to go ahead and let those of you who are not committee members but do have proposals, I'd like to go ahead and let y'all present your request at the beginning of the meeting, if you'd like to do that. And let's see, did Senator Irvin, have you joined? My picture just changed. Oh, now we're live. We've started our meeting. We are live, and I'd like to go ahead and get started, but I just want to make sure. Oh, good. We've got Representative Gray. Hello. And Secretary Cook. And there is Senator Irvin. So we've got everyone that was planning on attending is here. Thank you. So let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. We have, I circulated the minutes, and I do apologize that I sent those out, I think a little bit late. I thought I'd sent them out sooner, but those went around. It would be minutes from both the September 23rd meeting and then that short or emergency called meeting on September the 25th. So if everybody has had the opportunity to review those. Yes, go ahead.
Motion to approve both sets of minutes. Representative Jean.
Thank you, Representative Jean. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Representative Allen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The minutes have been approved. Okay, let's move on. We've got Secretary Walther here and
yes, ma'am.
Wonderful people from DFNA. Can you let us kind of give us a standing of where we are?
Okay, Madam Secretary, did you send out the spreadsheet that we sent to you to all of the CARES committee?
I don't think I did. I do not think that I did. I
okay.
Can do that now.
All right, that's fine. When we do the spreadsheet by agency and we do the distribution, the remaining balance at this point in time is $22.698 million. That includes a holdback or a set aside of $85 million that's remaining of the $250 million that we had originally had set aside for after October the 1st. There's also a $6.6 million that Secretary Gillespie has indicated will be coming back from one of the projects. So if you were to add the 85 and the 6.6 back into the 22.7, I would suggest to you that in total, we have $114.3 million available for distribution. That concludes my report. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And to the committee members and your CCs, I have just sent that by email to each of you if you'd like to look at it and if you have questions. And then also, since you're just getting it, it's fine if you want to ask, questions out of line. That'd be fine. Does anybody have any questions right now?
If they don't, they can ask them later if they would like. So that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. So 114.3 million available at this time. Okay, so we have on our agenda a number of things that have been brought, that will be brought by committee members or various state departments, but we do have a couple of legislative requests from legislators who are not members of our committee, and I'd like to give them the opportunity to bring their requests forward first if they, because they might have other business they need to take care of. So Senator Hammer, we had received your request for reimbursement for school meals some time ago. I have sent that around. It's changed a couple of times based on various revisions with the school districts. And I appreciate all the information that you have sent to us. I did send out to the committee members the additional information and the letter that you sent, and also supportive letters. I believe that Representative Evans is also on the call, and some others who had, I think you had 41 various legislators who had sent a letter to us. So I think everyone would have received that through their email and the attachments to this meeting. So I'd like to turn it over to you, Senator Hammer, and you'll need to turn your mute button off, and I'll ask you to go ahead.
How about now? Can you hear me now? Okay. I think also I have Superintendent Karen Walters that is on the Zoom that I'd like her to contribute to the conversation. And I think maybe Greg Rogers with the Department of Ed could explain one of the handouts that was emailed out to you. Just put it real short and sweet to respect the committee's time. What we're asking for is $9.8 million to reimburse the schools for the food services that they had to make whole at the end of the school year. I realized that they had received about 126 million across the state through the money that was sent out earlier. One of the challenges, though, is that many of these schools had to make themselves whole at the end of the fiscal year. And some of them are already running short because of the request of the food services. Superintendent Walters put together a real good outline that you should have received that would have explained how it is that it began, that they were asked to take care of meeting the food services need. And then Greg with the Department of Ed put together a spreadsheet so that we separated out the schools that did not have shortages from those that did. And we're only asking to make whole the schools that had the shortages. And Madam Chair, if I may, could we let Superintendent Walters kind of give a perspective from a superintendent's view as to how this impacts them?
Is that a thumbs up? Am I okay to?
Now we can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Hammer, for asking me to speak today. I too will be brief. I know you have a lot of business. As Senator Hammer stated, March 12th, we were told that we were going to be closing our doors for a while, and found out later it was for the rest of the school term. We were asked to keep our staff working. We were asked not to lay anyone off, and we were asked to please feed students. And that both of those items were in the first 2 days of press conferences, and we tried to do that. We did not reduce any of our staff. We fed thousands of meals during the time of our closure, but it was about 20% of the meals that we would feed in a time that we were on campus pre-COVID. And when our reimbursement costs were at 20% and our labor costs stayed the same, you can see the kind of deficits that we all realized. And that, when I say we realized, those of us that have our own food service workers. We could have laid off staff, and we probably could have worked at about 20% of our normal capacity. We did not do that, and most of our school operations were funded based on our state funding that we received, the foundation formula, and our service account is one account that is totally based on reimbursement of student meals. We receive no other funds besides the reimbursement of the meals that we served. So Bryant is very lucky. We operate in the black every year. We don't go in the red in our food service department, which is not always the case. However, this year, at the end of the year, we were in the red about $350,000, and we had to use our CARES Act funds to take care of that. We received a little over $700,000. And while that may sound like a lot of money, when you have 9,300 students and have to provide PPE for those students, our CARES Act money is gone. Actually, I placed an order today for more masks. We're already running out, and all the PPE that we are now purchasing is coming out of our operating budget. So if we were able to be made whole as far as the food service, that would allow us to use those CARES Act funds for what I believe they were more intended for, and that is to help with some of these other COVID-related costs. I appreciate your consideration, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Madam
Thank
Chair,
you. Go ahead.
if Greg Rogers is on the line, and if anyone had questions about the ESSER funds and how it is that we arrived at 9.8, I think he would be the one best to explain what I think everybody should have received that would have had the various columns on it.
Thank you. We do have a question from Representative Allen. Go ahead, Representative Allen.
Is it 9.8 or 90.8?
9.8.
Oh, okay. I had written down 90.8.
Yeah, it's actually, if
My
you want me to, I can be clear, it's $9,861,458.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Certainly. Does anyone have any questions? Yes,
do.
go ahead, Senator Urban.
I'd like for Greg Rogers to explain this spreadsheet that we received where there's a huge discrepancy between some of the amounts that are listed. Some are in excess of $500,000 that some schools would get, some $395. So I'd like to know more information about how these numbers were derived and why some schools, I guess, could you explain? Because I'm not understanding why some schools have an expense over the revenue and some do not, and the differences between the two.
Okay, I can.
Why that's the case for some schools and not for others.
So what I did was I pulled their total expenditures and their total revenue, and out of their expenditures, I took any equipment expenditures they might have had. And then what was left is what we showed here as so really it is just a revenue versus expenditure model that I set up and showed the differences of what they had just for food service. Because that, as Dr. Walter said earlier, that the food service is just from the reimbursement from the feds or from the student pays accounts. And so that's really all I did was look at what they had as expenditures and what they had as revenues. And this is the difference. Some of them that you'll see different amounts that have zeros on them are those that had their own food service contracts, companies, and those didn't see the losses like the school districts that have their own food service workers in. And it could be a difference of how many, the bigger the school district, how many they have employees there, what meals they were serving. There's a lot of different factors that go into the expenses of it, but that's my sheet. It's just really just showing revenues versus expenditures.
Well, I understand that. I mean, to follow up on that question, I mean, you have a variance of some that are 5.7 million, that was spent, I suppose, excluding equipment. And then there's no money that they are requiring. So is it just a matter of how these were managed at the school level? Some managed them better than others, or I guess I'm not quite understanding why there are some schools that have expenses over revenue and some that do not, because I really don't see a pattern there. And then B, and I apologize for the phone. And then B, they received a lot of direct federal funding, and what did they use those expenses on? And have you laid that over what this is?
So the ones that you're seeing without the shortage on there, the majority of those are going to be those that have food service contracts. Those are the ones that set up an outside vendor that actually prepares the meal. The staff is the food service contract. The food is prepared for them. So when there were no more meals or the meals were reduced, the food service vendor dealt with that. It wasn't a school issue. It wasn't a school district issue. On the other, so that's what you're seeing, why you'll see some of that didn't have the reflection on those. As far as the federal funds, yes, they did federal funds for these, but when they were still preparing the meals and they were still be able to pull that money down, but they were no longer receiving the student pay, those accounts that weren't free and reduced lunches, they were no longer receiving that. And a part of the requirement at the end of the year is districts cannot close their food service accounts in the negative. So districts have to find these losses where these negatives where they are and put those into the food service account to make it whole.
Okay, but they could have used their federal money for this amount. Is that correct?
So their food reimbursement money has to only be used. The money that they receive from the USDA for food service can only be put in that account and used for food service.
So schools received USDA money in addition to the CARES money? Is that what you just?
Under the normal reimbursement of food for those free and reduced lunches?
Yeah.
Yes, they received their reimbursement amount of that. And so what I'm showing here is those expenditures they had that were above any of those revenues that they had.
I understand. What I'm asking about is the direct money that they received. I think that the superintendent discussed that, the direct money that was received directly from the CARES Act itself. There was, I know one of my schools in my district received over $500,000. So of that money, it could have been used for this as well, from my understanding from my understanding.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's the ESSER funds that you're talking about, which Senator Hammer talked about earlier, the $126 million of ESSER funds that was released through the CARES Act. That's a reimbursement also. And so what you'll see on that column, in the middle column C, that's where I reflected those districts that did have to use some of their ESSER funds to make up that that shortage that they had in their food service. The ESSER funds could be used in 4 different categories when they were released. One was food service, one was technology, one was ongoing operations, and I just forgot what the 4th one was. But there were 4 different categories they could use it in, so food service was one of them.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, the last question, Bismarck School District, they spent $10,069.14 of ESSER funds to make themselves whole. Their expenses were $527,415.92, but then they will receive nothing in the ways of this model.
Oh, no, ma'am. I'm sorry. Maybe I misunderstood. No, in the total $9.8 million, I included the ESSER funds that they had to use plus the shortages. So the $9.8 million includes that column C, the food service expenses from ESSER, and the amount over expenses. That way this proposal would give the districts like Bismarck that $10,000 back to use for the other things they needed to use their ESSER funds for.
Okay. I see that now. Okay, and then the schools that didn't use ESSER funds and still also don't get any of this money, it's because they had a contract with a food service vendor.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
So if I may follow up on that line of questioning, the contracts, what happened with those contracts? Were they able to just cancel the contracts, or did the school districts continue paying those?
That it really falls upon the food service contract provider at that point, because they weren't providing meals as what they would have initially contracted with the school district for. So the food service provider really is the one that's having to take that burden on, not the district themselves.
Madam Chair.
Yes, please go ahead.
Could we have Representative Evans weigh in? I think he has some things to contribute, and he's on the call as well, please.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you. And just to clarify, and they were great questions by Senator Ervin, one of the four things that the ESSER funds were allowed to be spent on was PPE. So I think our districts, one, had to make a very difficult decision of, do we purchase PPE? Do we enhance our technology? Because under the Department of Ed's directive, every district then had to provide a virtual offering. So the bulk of their expenses were spent on PPE and technology, and then be able to spend what was left on food service. The other thing that kind of comes into play on that is that when you're talking about public schools, the ESSER funds were issued based upon a formula calculation of their free and reduced lunch population. So if you look at our districts that have a much lower free and reduced lunch population, the amount of ESSER funds that they received was considerably lower, therefore having less money available left over to use on food service, because they still had the same number of students to purchase PPE and technology for.
Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you. Does Senator Hammer, did you have something else?
Yes, ma'am. If we could let Dr. Walters add in one other thing, and then then we'll be glad to answer any questions. And I've got closing comments at the appropriate time.
I would just like to add to Senator Ervin's point about being able to use our CARES Act funds for this. That is something that we did at Bryant. We used money to take care of the deficit. The issue is what I talked about earlier, and this is nothing that our state had any control over. Our federal government said these funds were to be distributed based on the Title I formula. So that's what our state had to do. But as I said earlier, you know, we received a little over $700,000 for 9,300 students. I know of a district that has about 1,500 students, and they received $555,000. So they got $360 per student, and at Bryant we received $76 per student. And again, when we're talking about the PPE that had to be purchased, the hand sanitizer, you know, yes, we were able to use those funds, but now we're having to rob Peter to pay Paul. And so now all of the PPE expenses that we have, and we're in the 7th week of school, all of that is going to have to come out of our operating because we had to use that. And in regards to the contracts, I can't speak for every company. I don't know, you know, every district's contracts that they have. I can tell you that the colleagues that I spoke with, when we went into closure, those contracts stopped. Those food service companies laid those people off. Those people drew unemployment. And so they were coming to the state for unemployment benefits, and our people did not. They received their check. And so those of us that kept those people working like we were asked to do, they did not obtain any type of benefits because they were continuing to be paid.
Okay, and I think there was you clarified something that I had a question about with the way that the ESSER funds are determined. That's not based on the free and reduced?
It's based on what there's called the Title I formula.
Title I formula, that's right, okay.
The formula isn't exactly based on free and reduced. It is a factor. It also looks at census data. Poverty is a big part of that, and those funds are identified to help students. We know it takes a lot more money to, you know, educate a student of poverty and, you know, teaching them to read, that more interventionists and things like that. But this money, it was about volume of kids and, like I said, the number of PPE. And I understand the why they were trying to get these funds out very quickly, and that was a formula that they already had established. So I understand the why behind it, but it wasn't really an equitable way to distribute funds for, I feel like, the purposes that this money was for.
Okay. Thank you. And you may have already addressed this, but one of the questions that I had earlier before we spoke was about the reimbursement mechanism for meals. You always think that the meals are reimbursed, but in this case, only the meals that were served are reimbursed. Is that
Yes,
one
ma'am.
of the reasons why we have such a deficit here?
That is correct. So prior to COVID, we were serving about 5,600 lunches a day. And so we were being reimbursed on those meals. And even if it's a paid student, we get a small portion of those meals reimbursed from the federal government. It's not the same as a student who is identified as a free student, but so we were getting reimbursed based on 5,600 meals a day. And when it went down to, 13 to 1,500, and we were delivering meals every day on 15 buses. We were going around to neighborhoods. We did everything we could to deliver as many meals as we could. Changed several times how we were doing that so we could increase our participation. It wasn't easy. We started out, we weren't using buses, and a couple of people showed up, and people had guns when they got there with their food. And so we had to change that. So we tried really hard to make sure we were getting food to the kids that needed it. The issue is just a mere business fact of labor costs stayed the same and revenues were 20%. And in the business world, I think we all know we'd have to reduce staff, and we were asked not to do that. So.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, Senator Hammer, was there anything else that you would like to mention?
Yes, ma'am. I would just ask that you would consider your decision that the schools were asked to continue to provide their meals, and that they were asked to, as Superintendent Walters outlined in the diagram, that they did what they were asked to do, and the schools had to make themselves whole at the end of the year. And that money that they used to make themselves whole now is catching up on the backside as far as their ability to purchase the PPEs and the other critical things. You notice that we have it right down to the dollar. So these are funds that were already expended that were being asked to reimburse. So it's not like we're asking for something that we are projecting as an expense. These were expenses based on the model that was given that have already been made. And so I think the evidence is there that what this money would be going for is what they were asked to do, and we are simply reimbursing the schools. And so respectfully, I'd ask that the committee approve this request and pass it on so the legislature can have an involvement in it. And I truly appreciate y'all's time and the job that you're doing. It's a thankless job, and we appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time and for your all the information in your presentation today.
Thank you.
With that, unless any committee members have any questions, I see Representative Allen, you're off mute. Did you have something?
No question.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Oh,
Then, okay, great. Then I'd like to move on to Senator Garner's proposal. He has sent a proposal, and in that we have a letter from him that's also been signed by a number of additional legislators. There were 5 additional legislators, including our own committee member, Senator Wallace, who's not able to be with us today. He is down at the Gulf in the Orange Beach area, assisting in the hurricane recovery. So, Senator Garner, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman, and thank you to committee members. First, before we get started, due to the changing of the reserve fund for the unemployment trust fund and some other allocations, I want to modify my request to a lower number. I've had discussions with the VA and other veterans groups, and I think I tried to bite too much off the apple with that number of requests, and also to narrow the scope of what the actual money would go to. So the new request, assuming there's a motion done by the committee of this extent, would be for $5 million, and it would only be used to do the nonprofits to do peer-to-peer and other vital services they provide. So that's the what. Let me explain the why. So for the last year and a half, I've been part of the Veteran Suicide Task Force, that piece of legislation I passed in 2019, and the joint committees of children, aged, and youth, and state agency has been going around the state from Van Buren to Conway to El Dorado and to other places to hear about veterans issues. And those meetings have been very substantial. We've heard from not only the VA on the ground at those locations, from veterans groups, from nonprofits, and from veterans themselves, but from the families of veterans who have committed suicide and lost their lives through that act. And that was before the COVID-19 crisis happened. Once the COVID-19 crisis happened, of course, we stopped those meetings for preventing the spread. And because of my background of being a veteran, because of my experience since being a legislator of dealing with veterans issues, anecdotally, I heard from multiple veterans who said they are having issues with, say, the VA or getting the care they need. I had family members call me, say that because of the stressors put on by the COVID-19 crisis, some of their veterans who had PTSD or other mental health issues were having events happening that could lead to suicide or violent outbursts. And that happened throughout the whole pandemic. And then we had our first meeting again of that joint task force on 08/31. We had officials from the VA, and I asked them directly and pointedly if veteran suicide crisis has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And both of them affirmatively said yes. Here's some information that we got. So a study says that for every 5% of unemployment that was added to veterans groups, you have roughly 550 additional veterans commit suicide, and additional 20,000 have substance abuse issues. Obviously, Arkansas wouldn't be that whole percentage, but as we see our veterans unemployment go up, we're going to see an increase in veteran suicide. In August 2nd, there have been 2,500 veterans killed due to COVID-19. During that same time period, we have lost over 3,000 veterans due to suicide. The Veterans Affairs Office in Fayetteville say that they have a 20 to 25% increase in people calling the crisis hotline, which is a hotline used to protect that veterans will call if they're in a crisis situation. And that has corresponded with an additional increase of veteran suicide. And to talk about on a national level, military leaders have estimated that roughly 20% increase in active duty deaths from suicide. The Army alone is over 30%. And in the highest group of that is National Guard soldiers, which we know we have a large population here in the state. So what this money would go to is it would go to the VA to provide grants for our nonprofit groups. What we found out from that extensive study is that nonprofit groups do an excellent service directly to veterans, whether that's crisis intervention, whether that's providing them food or shelter. These are usually peer-to-peer groups, which are veterans leading veterans to help veterans. And what we found before was that they were woefully underfunded, but during the pandemic, it has exacerbated that even more. As many of you probably know, that nonprofit fundraising operations have went to zilch. You can't hold events, you can't have speakers come in, and people who typically maybe have more money are being hurt by the economic and business climate we face Arkansas today. So that money would go directly to those peer-to-peer groups, like We Are the 22, a great organization out of Little Rock, to other groups throughout the state. Of course, the VA would have to set up the parameters of how that grant system would work, and I'd be more than happy to work with them. I didn't want to get too detailed on how that would work until the money was approved, but I think that'd be a good way. And with that, that's all my comments. I'll answer any questions from committee.
Thank you. Committee members, does anyone have any questions for Senator Garner? Okay, I don't see any questions right now, but it may be that we come up with a question. We might reach out to you this evening or maybe tomorrow. And I appreciate the change. So we'll make a note that it's a request for $5 million, and
Correct.
specifically for the nonprofit groups for crisis intervention and vital services. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a good day. Appreciate the committee.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, committee members. And I just wanted to make sure that we're clear. I should have said at the very beginning, we are having 2 meetings, one today and one tomorrow. I know that's a lot of time for y'all, but we've gotten down to the wire on our funding, and we really wanted the opportunity to know how much money we had before we started And before we started just voting in issue proposals, we wanted the opportunity for everybody to really kind of sit back and think about this and look at where we are and going forward, because I think we've been moving kind of fast. So the next thing on our agenda is we have a Department of Finance and Administration request to increase our pre-approved funds for the state agencies. We didn't put anything in writing on that. Secretary Walther, or do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's an amount that we believe is out there among the agencies, the state agencies, for PPE that has been purchased, PPE and the like, that has been purchased but has not been requested reimbursement. And we needed an additional $5 million.
And it's my understanding we've expended the initial $5 million, correct?
That's correct.
Does anyone have questions of Secretary Walther regarding that? Okay. Thank you. The next thing we have on our agenda is from Department of Transformation and Shared Services. And we have Secretary Fetcher on, of course, our committee member. And then she has some others with her to assist. And I hope y'all saw I've sent a late a revision to the proposal. So hopefully you have seen that. And if not, let me know and I'll send it again. But Secretary Fetcher, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Secretary Smith. The pandemic has really highlighted the cybersecurity risks to our state, especially to the IT systems due to our fragmented and aging IT infrastructure. So today we have a proposal before this committee to modernize the infrastructure and which will strengthen our cybersecurity defenses. And I'd like to turn it over to Director Jessica Jones to give us more information.
Thank you, Secretary Fetcher. Workers are staying home. Collaboration platforms and other digital tools. In their free time, they're going online to shop and stream videos. Behaviors put a large amount of it.
I'm having a little trouble. Is it on my end?
I'm having the same problem.
I can't understand about half of what she's saying.
Sorry. She may be, are you on wireless?
Secretary Jones, this is Anthony at the governor's office. It might pay you to call in using a phone line into the call-in number because we're getting digitization of your signal.
Give me 1 minute.
Thank you. And while she's calling in, I just want to let the committee members know, I hope that it's okay. Representative Collins, I should have you and Senator Bond and Secretary Preston, I should have moved y'all up to the top of the agenda as well. So as soon as we finish with this TSS proposal, I'll go ahead and ask if y'all would be willing and interested in presenting, because I don't need to keep you. Thank you. I think she's calling in now. Let's see.
Teleconference service. Please enter your access code, followed by the pound sign.
She's coming on.
Join the star. Otherwise, press. The conference has been locked by the host. You have been joined to the waiting room, and the host has been notified about your arrival.
And then Jessica, you'll need to
Good afternoon to you.
Yeah, we can hear you on the phone, but you'll want to make sure to mute your computer, if that makes sense. We'll just go ahead and talk.
I apologize for that.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Again, as I was saying, I'm hearing some feedback, so I'm going to go ahead and continue. The response. Hear me?
No, if you can use the telephone only and not the computer, then we probably can hear you better.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, very clear. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. So again, thank you, Madam Chair and Secretary Fetcher. As I was mentioning, the response to COVID-19 has increased cyber risk to our state IT systems. Workers are staying home, using video conferencing services, just like I was a second ago, collaboration platforms, and other digital tools to do work. Some in the free time, they might going online to shop, read, chat, play, and maybe stream videos. And we all know that these behaviors put a large amount of stress on existing cybersecurity controls and have opened up new avenues for attackers to exploit. Also, the rapid deployment of technology to allow for remote work of employees increase the risk of cyber attacks. So as the COVID-19 outbreak progresses, cyber attackers will continue their efforts to exploit our fears and our digital vulnerabilities. Some employees may have been unable to work from their own personal devices, but because their devices are not centrally controlled, they can introduce vulnerabilities. During this crisis, it became apparent that the decentralization of our infrastructure has left many systems vulnerable, and the need to modernize is more important than ever, particularly as we allow remote access and remote work, and the citizens are using remote access into our systems. So in order to prepare for another event of this nature, we as a state must modernize our IT infrastructure so that remote access can be done securely. We have learned that we need to have flexibility to respond to fast-changing operational situations. So today, we're asking for $33.5 million to improve the state's cybersecurity posture by modernizing and optimizing IT systems. By enhancing the security of our IT infrastructure, we will provide secure, scalable, and responsive capabilities, and we will increase our state's ability to improve service delivery to our citizens. The funding proposal includes the procurement of all equipment necessary to modernize and secure the state's IT infrastructure. So in closing, I can say that with the current crisis, we know that the status quo is no longer a viable option for the state. We as a state must take action to mitigate our significant enterprise IT risk. And through this modernization effort, the state will address this risk and achieve efficiency improvements. So your support and commitment to this strategy is critical to success. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, or Secretary Fetcher, do you have anything else to add?
No, if there's any questions, we'll be happy to take those.
Thank you. Any questions? I see, well, I thought that was Representative Gina. Does anybody have any questions?
I do, if nobody else.
Okay, please go ahead, Senator Bond.
So I think we just got this proposal, correct?
Yes.
And so I have a few questions about it. One is, where are these numbers coming from? Is this from a third-party contractor? Are we going to bid this out?
We have had some third-party contractors look at the infrastructure that's needed to set up a data center. However, the numbers you're seeing before you is taking some of their numbers as well as the work that the staff at DIS has done to put together a plan that you're seeing now. So that's not coming from one particular vendor or contractor.
And then this is going to be done by the end of the year, by December 30th, 31st?
What you're seeing before you is a proposal to get all of the equipment needed. So yes, we can procure all of that by the end of the year, by December 30th.
And you would do that on a competitive bid that quickly, or that'd be some kind of preferred? How would that work?
To do it that quickly, it would most likely have to be through a cooperative contract that has been competitively procured previously.
And that may have went over my head. What I heard in the presentation was we have a fragmented and aging IT infrastructure. That was said, and then additionally it was said to prepare for another event of this nature, we need to do this. And so, hey, I agree we need to update our IT infrastructure, and I think that's a choice the legislature has to make with real money, not with CARES Act money. And I think this is just sort of an attempt to take CARES Act money and plug a budget and something that we haven't been willing to do either through the executive branch and the legislature in our normal general revenue budget. So I think it's an inappropriate use of the funds at this time. There are numerous other needs. The proposal is very late. I don't have confidence that it can be done by the end of the year, although we all hope that the deadline will be extended. But I just don't think it's an appropriate use of CARES Act funds. There's a lot of, I keep mentioning our teachers in schools. We had a proposal on schools, but we have a proposal for health and safety payments for teachers, which I'm told has not been approved for the agenda, which I think the committee should consider along with these types of things, at least for discussion purposes. We have businesses and individuals that continue to get sort of hammered in this economy. And it looks to me like we're taking an opportunity to use our CARES Act money to solve a problem that's related to us not prioritizing IT infrastructure in the past. And so I think what's made that clear is the presentation. I appreciate it. I understand the problem. If I was staying in the legislature, I would be willing to fund it, but I don't think this is an appropriate use of CARES Act money.
Thank you, Senator Bond. We did send our proposal for DFNA, who has deemed it as appropriate use for the CARES Act money. And there are other states around the nation that are using it for similar projects. But I do appreciate your input.
Thank you. And we do have DFNA here if you'd like to hear from them and their analysis of the review related to the utilization of these funds.
It may just be a disagreement. I'm just saying, that when we're told the status quo is no longer an option, we have a fragmented aging IT infrastructure, and this is to prepare for another event of this nature, then I just don't see how it can be related. The other thing is the acquisition of these things by the end of the year. Do we know what contractor we're going to use already?
The proposal didn't say we were absolutely using a contractor. It says that we are going to purchase the equipment needed and as needed, look at a vendor. So that there's no particular vendor, there's no contract that we're looking at right now.
So I thought you said earlier to get it purchased by the end of the year, it would have to be through someone we already had a contract with, a vendor we already had a contract with.
No, sir. It would have to be through what's called a cooperative contract, like the DIR out of Texas, where the state of Texas has competitively bid IT products, and we are part of that cooperative contract. That's what I was talking about. Or there's a NASPO as well that looks at IT infrastructure.
Secretary Smith?
Yes, we have a question from Secretary Gillespie. Go ahead, please.
Not really a question, just a comment from one of the state agencies that's part of the system. Although the proposal addresses, as you said, future events, the reality is for at least this agency, the event we are in does put a lot of stress on our current IT structure. And we are continuing to have to expand what we are doing on that structure. We see it over the next and coming months as something where the pandemic forced us to move remote. But even as it forced us to move remote and begin to change a lot of what we are doing, we are shifting from almost short-term crisis type response in that way to settling into shifting operations more and more virtually, and a number of them permanently. This is not something just that we are doing, and I'm not talking about moving workers out permanently, but a lot of our interactions with our Kansans, the federal government is now beginning to not just have temporary relaxation or change on the way we deliver services, but is now beginning to tell states you can begin to make permanent shifts and changes. So what you're seeing going on around in healthcare, around telemedicine, we're also seeing that evolving around a lot of our other programs. And I say that just to say, for us, this future event is actually now and will be going on through the rest of this year and into next year as we continue to shift our operations and put more stress on the IT infrastructure of the state. So for whatever, if that's useful at all to understand what's happening to us real time, I thought I might add that in.
Thank you, Secretary Gillespie. Anyone else? Senator Irvin, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Allen, go ahead.
I'd like to know, how did she arrive at the 33.5 million? How did you arrive at the $33.5 million figure?
Representative Allen, on page 2 of that proposal, there is a budget outlined.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't have it in front of me. So I guess my question is, how accurate is the $33.5 million figure?
We believe it's pretty accurate. Until we price out every piece of equipment, we won't know the exact, but we have worked on it quite extensively, which is why it's taken a while to get it to the committee, and we believe it's pretty accurate.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Well, I would just say that the proposal is for just the purchase of the equipment, and piggybacking on what Secretary Gillespie just referenced, going into next year, what's the timeline that this stuff would even be deployed? Surely there's going to have to be a contractor, somebody centralizes and modernizes and optimizes. I mean, are you looking at February, March, April, May? I mean,
Director Jones, would you like to address the timeline?
Absolutely. I think it will take between, we will have to do it, you know, obviously in phases, but between 6 months to a year. Again, this is the procurement of all the equipment that needs to be modernized, and our staff will be able to leverage that and start prioritizing those agencies that need to be centralized based on where we see the majority of the risk sits today.
well, and that is my point. 6 months to a year, the legislature will be in session in January. Lame duck me won't be a part of it. And I think this is just a budget priority. It's not a CARES Act priority. This isn't going to solve a pandemic problem in the short run. And it's, you know, I just am strongly against it. Not that matters. I've been strongly against other things, but I just don't see how it's an expenditure that fits within our purpose.
And Representative Bond, I mean, respectfully disagreeing on that, I can say that today there's some applications that required paper-based processes. And if we come to a point where if tomorrow everybody goes back remote, then we might have some state employees that are taking sensitive data to their homes instead of automating applications. You may have an application that today does not allow for a document to be scanned and to be uploaded. So that can provide, again, an open door to a cyber attack. Again, there's many legacy applications where the age of the application does not support modern authentication methods, which will allow for stronger passwords and multi-factor authentication. That is the reality. So again, you know, going remote, it opened our eyes as to we have to do this today. We cannot wait 6 months to a year and continue being exposed and expose the state to a cyber attack. And because how defragmented we are, we don't know exactly what open doors exist out there on each division.
This is Representative Gray. I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. I've been through lots of system migrations in my lifetime. I've never done true hardware migrations or installations, but I do know that all of those are very labor intensive. So if we're looking to have these all done, let's just say we get them done in the next year, do you have current budget amounts for the labor costs and everything that goes into the actual installation and go live? And if not, do you plan to come to the legislature this next session and request additional money? And if so, how much do you expect to request?
Thank you, Representative Gray. A lot of the work can be done by current DIS employees on the migration, as well as if there has to be a vendor. The way the funding at DIS works under the cost allocation model is it would be something that would be put into each one of the department's budgets as we went forward. Doing it this way would save a lot on that installation. They wouldn't be paying for equipment and migration, but just the migration. So it would lower the cost significantly for the department.
Well, you're going to have to speak faster. So tell me what's going on with this.
Okay, and is that, I guess, maybe to Larry Walther, is paying for equipment and installation prior?
So is this a good proposal?
Can you pay for the installation in November for something that's installed 10 months from now? Is that legal?
Well, let me get back with you because I'm on mine.
No, that's not what we're asking you to do, Representative Gray. It's just the equipment. We're not asking so much for the labor after December 30th.
Okay, I thought you said you were purchasing essentially the equipment and the installation was going to be included in that cost. I guess I misunderstood that.
Secretary Smith?
Yes, Representative Allen, go ahead.
You know, I think that in lieu of the fact that this was sent to us very late, I think we need to take our time and reevaluate this. And I would suggest that we have another discussion because there are some things that are just unclear. I think Senator Bunn brought up a good point, and I'm not for it, I'm not against it, but I just think I need a little bit more time to analyze this and do a little bit more research to see if this in fact can be done within that time frame. And I think that we need to look and see, make sure that this can be done with CARES funds, and make sure that this is not an issue that could be addressed during the General Assembly. I don't know, and that's one of the reasons why I'm feeling really uncomfortable with it right now.
Okay, we are not planning on having any voting today, so.
I know, but it's going to probably come back up tomorrow. So I don't think that between now and tomorrow is enough time for us to do our due diligence on it.
Okay.
At least for me.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. We will see what we can do about having additional information and getting some answers to some of the questions that have been brought up. Secretary Fetcher, how does that sound? Work on that, get more information for you guys tomorrow. And if you're still uncomfortable, then I mean you'll let us know. Does anyone else have anything else? Senator Irvin, I saw you moved your microphone.
No, actually, I just I have more questions for the Department of Ed. So if they could get in touch with me on that, I'm having a hard time understanding a little bit of the information that they've sent. I just have a lot of questions about that proposal. So
Okay.
in the same boat as Representative Allen, but just on a different issue.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else about the TSS before we move on? Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And I do appreciate the work that you and your team have done, Secretary Fetcher. I know it's been a lot of work put into this to get all these numbers so quickly. So I know we have, oh, there you are, Representative Collins. I don't know if anybody else, if this happens to y'all, but when you have the pictures, they move around. So I can't find y'all sometimes. Your chairs are changing. So Representative Collins is here, Senator Bond, and Secretary Preston. The rental assistance request came before us a few weeks ago. And Terry Bearden is here as well. We received some really good information from that. And one of the beautiful things I think about the makeup of the committee and the ability of the state of Arkansas is Secretary Preston identified the ability to have funds through his department. I think it's the CDBG fund. I might have said that incorrectly, but I'll turn it over to Secretary Preston, and he can explain that, and then we'll let Senator Bond, Representative Collins, and Ms. Bearden give us a little more explanation. But it sounds like we have kind of been able. I think we'll be able to provide rental assistance at a lesser cost, but still at the amount that had been requested. And so I think that's very important. It's very important for our state. And just as a little plug from my own department with the Fair Housing Commission here under the Department of Inspector General, we are seeing issues there, and we are concerned about tenants and landlords. So we appreciate your hard work in this area. Secretary Preston.
Thank you, Secretary Smith. And yeah, because we didn't have enough going on at Commerce, we decided to get into the rental assistance program as well. So in all seriousness, when we heard the proposal by Senator Bond and Representative Collins, was about the same time that we got approved by HUD for a separate allocation that was coming from the federal government. And part of that was addressing the exact same concerns that was brought to the committee. And the request at the time was $10 million. But through our HUD allocation for CDBG, which is a community development block grant program, it allocated us $5.76 million. So we figured that we would work together with Senator Bond and Representative Collins. I really appreciate them working with our team, and then working with Secretary Gillespie and DHS to all come together to put this program together, work on rules, and figure out how we're going to fund it. So the initial request was $10 million. That's what it'll end up being in the long run. But $5.76 million will come from our CDBG funds. So the proposal now to CARES, rather than being $10 million, will be for $4.24 million for that. I won't go in and belabor the point any further, get into the specifics, but I do have Gene Noble here in my office, who heads up our CDBG program, and Jim Hudson, our EVP of Operations and General Counsel, who can speak to specifics on the program. And I'll turn it over to Senator Bond and Representative Collins for any additional thoughts, comments, and again, thank them for their leadership and partnership on this, as well as Secretary Gillespie and DHS.
Sure. Well, I think that's really helpful, and I appreciate you guys coming forward with that idea. There's really not much of a difference in what would be done under this version of it. It would go through Commerce rather than DHS. The only thing that is a tweak is going from 200% of the federal poverty level, which had been the proposed eligibility level, to 80% of area median income. That's a different way of calculating what is essentially close to the same amount of income. I think the difference on an annual basis is just a couple $100, so it's pretty comparable. Otherwise, it's the same thing that you had before you a couple weeks ago, and just at a 4.24 million ask instead of 10 million before this committee.
Thank you. Senator Bond, or did you have anything you'd like to add?
Just thanks to Andrew. He's been the driving force, and then Commerce, obviously, thanks for their help. And Andrew's probably regretting after my comments on the last proposal that he got me involved in this one.
Okay, do we have any questions from the committee? I think possibly a lot of the questions had been answered last time around. Oh, good. We do. Senator Irvin, please go ahead.
Yeah, no questions. I just wanted to add that I was grateful. Department of Commerce, we had them come to Public Health, Welfare, and Labor Committee last week, I believe that it was, to talk about these funds and these programs. So, you know, it was a great win-win, in my opinion, in combination with this proposal. Thanks. And we were able to get the word out. That's really, really important. So we had a lot of representatives and senators that were there. So getting the word out is really critical for programs like this to work, but excited that we were able to locate these additional funds to be able to provide and offset the cost of this proposal. And so just being a good steward, I think, well done.
Agreed. Thank you. Yes, Representative Allen, go ahead.
I want to say to Secretary Preston, congratulations. I've had the opportunity to work with HUD over the years, and I've done some work with CDBG. I think those community development block grant funds are very helpful, and those funds normally hit the target. So I want to thank you for if you had something to do with it, but I just want to say that I think that this is a good project.
Thank you, Representative Allen. I've got Jean Noble here in my office, and she's one of the best in the country at managing the CDBG funds and does just a fantastic job for Arkansas. So all the kudos goes to the team sitting behind me.
Good.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I don't see any other questions.
And Secretary Smith, just one other point, just real quick on completely different subject, but on UI, again, thanks to everyone for the transfer on the trust fund, but I wanted to give a heads up on as we were looking at that spreadsheet, and I probably should have brought it up then early in the meeting, but just a heads up for everyone that with the lost wages assistance, this committee has approved $8 million for our match. That took us through the first 3 weeks of the LWA. We're now eligible to request the second 3 weeks for a total of 6 weeks. We will need another match for that. So I just wanted to put that in the back of everyone's mind. It will be a request that will go to ALC for the October, I guess it's the 16th meeting, to fully fund that match for the entire 6 weeks, as opposed to originally the request was just for the first 3. So we are going to make the request for the full 6 weeks, which will require an additional funds from CARES to get us to that level. Don't know exactly what that will total end up being, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 million potentially. But just wanted to put that on the radar screen of this committee. Nothing to consider today, but just something to keep in our minds for future payments.
Okay,
Mike, Mike, when will that go?
Secretary Walther, go ahead.
Mike, when will that go to ALC?
That will be at the October, I guess it's 16th meeting, I think is the date.
Okay, so
So it'll go to ALC first, and if ALC approves, then we would come back to CARES to ask for the difference in the funding that we need.
Okay, are you working with Jake to do the appropriation? Are y'all working with him?
Yes.
Jake Bleed?
Yes.
Okay, this is Senator Irvin. Just a reminder, in October, there won't be any subcommittee meetings. So everything will go straight to ALC, just so everybody's aware. So there won't be a peer subcommittee. It'll just go straight to ALC. Okay.
Thank you. And just so the committee understands, so the proposal will go to ALC first and see if the legislature is willing and interested in doing this prior to making a
Or we come
request
back
to CARES,
CARES. That's correct.
to us, the CARES Act Steering Committee. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you all for that.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is a request from the Department of Inspector General. That's my department. We have the Office of Medicaid Inspector General, and we needed to purchase a small amount, $8,024 medical records portal. We actually are utilizing Director Jones' DIS to build it. That's why we've gotten such a great deal on it, but we needed to do that in order to allow for medical records to come in remotely, since we can't go to medical offices. So we'll put that before the committee request fully tomorrow. The next request on our agenda is from Secretary Cindy Gillespie. We had a revision on, from the Department of Human Services. There's a revision on the food insecurity proposal. I think that came around again pretty late. So Secretary Gillespie, I've lost you on my picture. Please go ahead. There you are. Go ahead.
Okay. Great, thank you. So much thanks to Director Kathy Webb from the Hunger Relief Alliance for working with us on this. Essentially, the change in the proposal from when it came through the other day, we were at originally $2 million. It is now what we're proposing is 1.862 million, which is basically in 2 increments, as you'll see. We have dropped the request for infrastructure money because the funds that are going through cities and counties do allow those types of infrastructure purchases for freezers, et cetera, to be made as pre-approved items if the city or county wants to do that and work with the local food bank. So we have dropped that. And what we've also done is the canned food purchases. They can get, they believe, up to $1 million in canned food purchases in here, and that is a big need. And also, she talked extensively about what they're doing around beef, the Arkansas Beef Project, and beef processing, but we are adding some funds to supplement that with other meat purchasing, so that they can supply meat that is already processed around the state. And all of these expenditures, of course, would be made and received before the end of this year. There is a very, very, very small allocation of $76,000 in here for the Hunger Relief Alliance to do the work of purchasing and overseeing and transporting, et cetera. So same proposal as you saw, just with some elements removed, and an addition around canned goods and processed meats.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? I know this was extensively presented and discussed a couple of meetings ago. Happy to answer any questions. Okay, thank you. Appreciate the work on that. And the last one we have on our agenda is from the Department of Health. We have Chief of Staff Stephanie Williams and Director Sharonda Love. They have revised the mobile health unit request related to the health equity response team. And we really appreciate that. It has come down to, I think, 1.2 million. So if you guys would like to go ahead, we'd be happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Secretary Smith. You're correct. The original proposal has gone through several revisions. The proposal that was submitted in September was 6.59 million. And since that time, Director Love has worked closely with the representatives of the Health Equity Task Force and has revised the proposal to be more targeted. And we've also included the mobile health units in our state testing plan. So all the testing supplies, testing kits that were previously part of the proposal will now be funded and supported through the Department of Health as part of the state plan. And I believe Director Love is prepared to answer any detailed questions. but that's the highlight of the significant reduction in costs.
Thank you. Go ahead, Director Love, please. Thank you.
Sure. I think, thank you, Chief of Staff Williams. She hit the highlights for the proposal. We will be focusing on Delta County, Southwest and Central Arkansas, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't know if we have any. Okay, we do. Senator Urban has a question.
I just really want to send my appreciation to Dr. Love and everybody there. I appreciate what y'all did on this. I think it's very targeted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have questions? No? Or comments? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your work on that. I know it's sorry. Okay, I'm unmuted. So the last proposal that we have on our agenda today is from Department of Human Services related to nonprofit charitable organizations to address high minority and high poverty areas. They have been discussing with Representative Allen. If you would like to go ahead and discuss that, I'd appreciate it. Secretary Gillespie, Keisa Smith.
All right. I have Deputy Director Keisa Smith here, and then I know Representative Allen is also on the call. And I'm going to just turn it over to them to talk about what they're working to develop right now. It's not in final form, but just to go ahead and give the committee a heads up, and, since this is such a need.
So good afternoon, everyone. It is not lost on me that we are last and we are approaching 5 o'clock. So I will try to be concise, but also give you an idea. As Secretary Gillespie noted, you do not have this proposal in front of you. We have been working very quickly, but unfortunately, I have just been able to give all of the information of Representative Allen this morning, and I know he has had commitments with the Education Committee. And we are also still working out details with the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation and also with the Department of Finance. But the crux of our proposal is pretty much based on what you all know, which is that data has shown us that the pandemic has had a significant and disproportional impact on communities of high poverty. And so many low-income individuals in the state of Arkansas have consistently relied on small community nonprofits for everything from food, clothing, transportation, and job search assistance. They have been frameworks of the community and have helped the community continue on during hard times, and now we are in even harder times. What has been exacerbated by the pandemic is the fact that these organizations are often highly reliant on donations, and that is donations that they have not received during this pandemic. And so this proposal will be for these entities to present proposals up to $50,000 that will be vetted by the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, an organization that has a long history in working with organizations such as this and other nonprofits across the state. The proposal would be vetted. It would be determined whether or not these organizations could get the funding out within the time frame that is requested, which we are on a very short time frame, to be able to help communities that have been defined as high poverty. And high poverty is considered to be any city or county that has poverty of 20% or higher in the state, which unfortunately encompasses a good amount of our state, but we do believe is addressing some needs that are within the state. Just for you to know, this is for smaller community organizations. We are defining that with Winthrop Rockefeller. While we have some great charitable organizations in the state, this is not for our larger organizations like United Way. It is for community organizations that will provide direct services and at least 80%, but maybe higher, of the portion of the grant has to go to direct services and not to administrative functions for the organization. We know they have been hit, but the purpose of this is to help their surrounding communities. And we are working to get this proposal to you as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Representative Allen, would you like to say anything?
I just think that I want to thank Keisha and Dr. Gillespie. Keisha, you did a good job. I don't want to say anything. I think that if I say something, it might mess it up. So you've done a good job.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions regarding this proposal? No? Okay.
I do.
All right, go ahead, Representative Jean.
We heard 50,000 per entity. Do we have any idea what's the total amount they're requested to go to the Rockefeller Foundation?
At this stage, we're looking at potentially up to $5 million.
Okay.
But as you said, we are in development on this, so.
Now, will you have this information by tomorrow, or will this be for another meeting in 2 weeks?
It's my goal to have it to you by tomorrow. I need to finalize some things, but we just got off the phone with the Rockefeller Foundation. I need to finalize some things and also present that to Representative Allen, but that is the plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your work on this. I know this is a need that we've been wanting to address. Any other questions or comments from anybody? Y'all are gonna let me end a meeting 9 minutes early?
I have a question for Larry Walters, if I could get him right quick.
Okay, Representative Jean, Secretary Walther, Representative Jean has a question for you.
Larry?
I thought the meeting was over.
Well, not now. All right.
What you got, sir?
What I have is, if I'm correct, we have roughly around 65 million in requests today. And did you say earlier that we had 114 million available?
114,300,000.
Okay. And today's request roughly around 65 million?
Yeah, I didn't add it up, so I'll trust your numbers.
Okay. Do we anticipate any more money coming back?
I think logically, reasonably thinking we will have more money coming back, but I have no idea what it is because no one will give any indication of how much they might return.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate it.
I asked about like the broadband and I was talking to Bill Gossage about that this afternoon. And apparently we already have $100 million worth of requests out there. So we believe that number is going to be expended by the end of the year. So, and there's some others where there's some balances that are fairly high, but I think each individual agency would have to address those.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And I have reached out to the agencies to ask them to let us know if they're going to be able to get money back. Go ahead, Senator Ervin.
Does that, Representative Jean, does your 65 million include what Mike Preston added, the 10 or 15 million for unemployment? No.
No, just what we talked about today.
Okay. All right, that was my question. And then Secretary Smith, will we have the letter I sent to you at the next meeting, and when would that be? About the meat processing grant program?
Oh, okay. I don't know when we're going to have a meeting tomorrow. We'll have an opportunity to vote on these proposals. And yes, you have a request for meat processing, and it was
roughly around 5.4 million additional funds based on the grant applications and the requests that came in for the meat processing grant for the Department of Agriculture.
Right. And then I know
validity of their grants. They received 32 million in requests. We funded 5 million, And the Department of Ag believes that an additional 5.4 million will get us a very get to as many of those grant applications as possible. So that's what that letter and request is for. It's something we've already voted on. It would just be an additional money based on the amount of responses to the grant.
Thank you. And I know Senator Bond has another request he mentioned. I think it was 54 million for teachers and school employees.
That is correct. And I think, you know, as I've been sort of privately pressing, I think that discussion at least needs to occur before all this money is gone. You know, still we've asked our teachers and staff to do so much. And so, yes, I would love for that proposal to be in the discussion, and would have preferred that it be, you know, done before tomorrow, but it looks like it'll be done at a later time.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Senator Irving, for bringing that up too. Secretary Gillespie's flagging us down. Yes, do you need something?
I was just looking at the spreadsheet that you sent that Secretary Walter had prepared. I do believe we have another, it doesn't look like it includes the $4.5 million that we are returning from the ambulance direct care workers proposal. So in terms of Representative Jean's balance, there may be an additional 4.5 million in return funds.
We will double check. Santa Claus, we'll check our list twice. Thank you. Anyone else? I appreciate y'all so much. We're closing a minute early. We will see you again tomorrow. Hopefully tomorrow will be faster. Someone's talking. What's up? Someone have something else?
This is Representative Gray. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you. No, I just know we had talked in prior meetings about everyone coming back to us in October, showing us what their balances were and what they expected. And I know we've talked about it today, but do we have anything lined out to when the agencies will be coming forward and just telling us where they're at and updating us?
Yes, in fact, I'll work on that. And I don't know that I can have it by tomorrow. I think a lot of those we can have by tomorrow, but some of them that we had just approved recently, we don't quite know yet. But I think that's a good point. And yes, maybe what we'll do is have a meeting that won't go before ALC, but another meeting for us to look at things. And I think that's one of our issues with this timing is we want to make sure if we need appropriation that we get to ALC in time. So thank you. Anyone else?
62. Madam Secretary,
yes.
We're looking at somewhere between 75 and 80 million dollars. Is that right, Paul? That are on the table that were discussed today.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Allen?
No question. I'm good.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We will be adjourned. I will see you all again on Zoom tomorrow, 3:30. Thank you.